For a lot of people, video games aren't just a way to pass the time. For some, they are a gateway to another world full of possibilities. For others, it's the perfect way to unwind after a long workday and just forget about the burdens of everyday life. Regardless of why you play, gaming is a very freeing experience. It gives you an opportunity to immerse yourself in a life outside of your own, especially with all of the amazing open worlds we've gotten over the past few years. Open world games have always been my favorite genre. Of course, I have a special place in my heart for more linear titles. In fact, my favorite game of all time could be considered somewhat linear, but there is something so magical about being able to see something interesting in the distance and make the journey to discover it. However, the definition of what makes an open world game has somewhat changed over the past few years. Growing up, my first experience with an open world was probably exploring the fields of Hyrule and Ocarina of Time, being mesmerized by the fact that I could point out a mountain, and after checking the necessary boxes, I could scale it myself. Now in present day, we have Breath of the Wild, where if you see something that piques your curiosity, there are truly no boundaries in the way if you want to head straight there. Nintendo themselves have mentioned that they consider this an open air game because of the limitless possibilities and lack of invisible walls, but all the same, it just shows how far open worlds have actually come. However, now that open world exploration titles are the most popular genre in gaming, I find that a lot of developers lose some of the magic that the genre has to offer. Well, I guess the question should be, what makes a good open world game in the first place? By definition, an open world game is a game designed as non-linear, meaning it consists of an open area with many ways to reach an objective. This basically means that the way I complete a task in my game might look much different than the way you do it, sort of creating a one-of-a-kind experience for each individual player. I mean, that's probably why they're so popular on YouTube. It's entertaining to see the many ways people overcome any given obstacle. While I think that most games are able to achieve this, I think the problem comes from games that try to give the player a false sense of this feeling. With a game like Breath of the Wild, it's clear that Nintendo's intention was to have the players solve their problems in their own ways. One great example of this would be the tutorial. There's a snowy mountain area that is too cold for Link to travel without freezing to death, so it's up to you to come up with a way to survive the journey to the peak. For some people, they might find a recipe for a cold-resistant meal, others might stock up on healing items in a mad dash to the top, or if you're dumb like me and want to make things hard for yourself, you might make 100 campfires. I'm not even kidding, I sound crazy, but I actually did this. To me, this is what a truly open world should feel like, and it's near impossible to travel the same path as another player. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of my favorite games in recent years. I think the storyline is incredible. Arthur Morgan is an exceptionally good character, and hey, for the most part, the open world is pretty damn beautiful. Here's the problem though. As much as Rockstar tries to trick you into believing that you have your own unique experience, the game actively holds you back from leaving the path they paved for you. I know that sounds pretty harsh, but hear me out. There were countless times where I wanted to interact with the world in specific ways and was denied, and later in the story I found that I needed to progress just a bit more to do the thing I wanted to do. That sounded a bit confusing, so let me give you an example. While exploring the world of Red Dead 2, you can stumble across a religious cult camp deep in the woods. At first, it seemed like a hidden mystery, something that you can only come across for being at the right place at the right time. Turns out you were never supposed to find this location until later in the story when you actually have a reason to. I know this sounds very minor, but the amount of different situations where this happens is crazy. Nakey Jakey has a great video about this on his channel where he shares a ton of more disappointing experiences like this one, so definitely make sure to check out that video. I truly don't believe that scripted events in games are a bad thing, but to try to convince a player that they can experience a game in their own unique way, but then instantly shut them down when they try to do something out of the ordinary, it's just the wrong way to go about things. It's like the developers were having an identity crisis between whether or not Red Dead 2 would be an open world or more linear experience. Take a look at Skyrim. The game lets you tackle any obstacle in your path with practically no restrictions right out of the gate. While this obviously doesn't work for most titles, the reason it's so effective here is because of the balanced leveling system. No matter where you go in the map, the enemies aren't just going to one-shot you for being a lower level because they're scaled to wherever you are in the game. It creates such a great level of freedom, and it's one of the biggest reasons why the replayability of the game is so high. On the other end of the spectrum, Black Desert Online effectively does the opposite. It's virtually impossible to explore the world fully if you aren't max level, For example, I would constantly find myself wanting to adventure with my friends, but would die instantly as soon as we reached a location that was just a bit higher than my own level. It kills any sense of discovery you might have, and you can literally feel the grip of the developers holding you back. While all of these factors are what make or break open worlds, there needs to be some kind of incentive to explore them. Some games boast sprawling landscapes to go through, but if there's nothing to push the player to diverge from the beaten path, then is it really worth it? Warning, I'm about to give a pretty unpopular opinion, so don't hate me. As masterful as The Witcher 3 is, I think the world map is actually pretty lackluster. Sure, you have some cool locations like the big cities and the islands, but I find it hard to not just beeline to whatever waypoint I might have. Yeah, there are tons of interesting side quests to partake in, but I never really found myself running around without a destination. Most of the problem is due to the fact that I spend more time looking at the minimap than the actual game, but there's also really no physical rewards for spending time in no man's land. It just makes the beautiful landscapes feel kind of pointless, other than the story. Let me put it this way. When I first played Ghost of Tsushima, 90% of my experience was just spent exploring the places I found interesting. The reason for this wasn't the fact that the map was big, or that things looked pretty, but because I knew that if I saw a landmark out of the ordinary, there was almost definitely something to discover there. Whether it be a legendary duel with another samurai, or a shrine holding some new armor to wear. I'm sure that the lack of a minimap had some impact on this, but the developers gave me more reason to spend that extra bit of time outside of the story. So what would create the best possible open world? First off, I think that it's important to understand that size doesn't matter. You could have the largest map in the history of gaming, but it means nothing without its contents. Without the incentive to explore, whether that be collectibles or intriguing events, there is no reason for a game world to be considered open. And finally, developers need to understand that players are not stupid. They will figure out things by themselves and don't need any hand-holding. I think if all of these factors come together, we could have a game world that is near perfect. But what do you think? What draws you to open world games personally? What are some examples of your favorites? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. Also, want to give a huge thank you to you guys. We finally hit 3,000 subscribers and I am extremely excited and I really appreciate it. If you aren't subscribed and want to, you're definitely welcome here. We'd love to have you. As always, keep gaming to the fullest and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.